The Savile Grand had been designed to impress the moment a car door clicked open. The gentle curve of its glass facade caught the Texas sun and poured it back onto the sidewalk in softened light. Bellmen in charcoal jackets moved with the precision of stagehands. The lobby smelled faintly of orange blossoms and fresh linen, a signature fragrance someone in corporate had named confidence. On most mornings it worked. Guests inhaled and straightened their shoulders. Deals closed themselves. Photographs found their good side. But at 6:32 a.m. on the first day of the International Systems Security Summit, confidence couldn't mask the sound of failure. The master security panel had frozen. Every camera feed had gone dark. Electronic door locks had seized. The fire command console was in a safety default that might as well have been a stubborn prayer. And a thin red line of text kept stitching across the main monitor like an accusation. Access denied. System corrupt. Men in suits, always a little louder than they realized, crowded the control room with their breath fogging on the chilled glass. Consultants spoke in acronyms and decimal points. The hotel manager, a man who believed volume could bully problems into submission, paced with the heel click of a metronome and snapped at anyone who stood still long enough to be blamed. Outside the glass, a woman pushed a cleaning cart down the service hall. She wore rubber gloves and a navy uniform with a badge that said Gloria in white letters. The hallway lights reflected off the polished floor like a second, shinier world. She moved through both with the ease of a person who knew where every bucket and forgotten umbrella lived. When an engineer brushed by her and asked her to clear the hallway, "National-level crisis, ma'am. Thank you." Gloria nodded and pivoted the cart without complaint. She had learned long ago that a nod cost her nothing and bought her time. She paused at the window just for a beat. On the main screen, the error messages weren't simply angry. They were familiar. The pattern of the failure, the particular stagger of the prompts, the way the system asked for clearance and then shut the door before the key touched the lock. If you had written code for long enough, if it had held one of your bad days and your good days and your compromises, you knew its fingerprints. She did. A thickness rose in her throat, not resentment and not yet hope. Recognition, maybe. The kind you feel when you hear an old song through a car door. Gloria kept moving. A housekeeper who stops is a housekeeper whose supervisor appears, and besides, the lobby marble waits for no one. She returned a "Good morning, Ms. Smith" to the bell captain, exchanged a smile with Lena from the night shift, who smelled of eucalyptus oil and laughter, and rolled toward the elevator like every other morning. On the 7th floor, she serviced a suite no one slept in. It had been booked by a regional vice president who preferred to stand on balconies and make calls. She set fresh towels on the counter and raked their edges into a perfect fan, wiped the mirror to a clean blue shine, emptied the small trash can with its brief history of secrets, conference badges, gum wrappers, a business card with a corner bitten off. The motions restored her. She liked things that obeyed when you insisted on order with your hands. Cloth that folded. Silver that gleamed. The small kingdom of the cart, where everything could be squared and aligned. Her radio crackled with the manager's voice. "All floors locked down. Keep the staff corridors clear. And keep the janitors away from the control room. They're in the way." It stung less than it once would have. There were only so many ways to be ignored before you learned how to live in the quiet. She turned the radio down anyway and looked at herself in the mirror. The tiny scar behind her left ear that was hidden by the bun she made every morning without looking. People made guesses about hotel work and what it had done to her body. No one thought to ask about a short circuit in a surveillance prototype on a summer afternoon years ago, about an engineer who had leapt without hesitation because fire didn't care about your job title. Back then, there had been conference rooms with glass that turned opaque at a voice command, a badge that opened doors other people pretended not to notice, white boards with handwriting she would have recognized from across a parking lot. Her name, her full name, Gloria L. Smith, on a paper about autonomous breach detection that a younger co-worker bragged to his mother about. She had been one of the voices in rooms that pretended to value only voices. She had been the last one out some nights. She had been proud. And then she had been accused. The first email arrived like a mosquito in a hotel lobby, small, easily dismissed, but signaling something ugly in the air. An internal audit request. A flagged download event traced to her credentials. A copy of a proprietary schema found on an outside server. "We're sure it's a misunderstanding," her supervisor had said, while smoothing the ends of her scarf. "But we must suspend your access immediately while we sort this out." Immediately was a word you could feel at the base of your neck. By lunchtime, her badge didn't open any door. By dusk, a whisper had developed into a certainty that would not slow down to consider the person it was running over. She had asked for an audit, and gotten one. It came back with the correct conclusion-fabricated headers, a spoofed relay, but by then the company had chewed the story into something easier to digest. Statements had been drafted. Phrases like regret and withhold judgment had been sent to inboxes with subject lines that sounded like quiet jobs for lawyers. In a perfect version of her life, she would have fought longer and louder. In the life she actually had, she discovered how quickly savings evaporated when rent requested proof you were still respectable. For a while, she worked the late shift at a diner that looked out onto a parking lot with a good view of a gas station. The manager there treated tips like trophies. Eventually, she found the Savile Grand. It was honest work and it steadied her hands. A person could start again, even if starting again meant people stopped using her last name in sentences. Now, in a seventh-floor bathroom where hand towels obeyed the geometry of righteousness, the same old song had found her through a window. She listened to the urgency in the radios running up and down the staff corridor, the peculiar fatigue in the voice of a tech who had been awake through the night. She considered the rightness of minding her business. She considered the ease of it. Then she stepped into the hall and pushed the cart toward the control room, because there are some things you can't not do without losing more than the job will cost you. The control room was glass. Walls, door, seriousness. You could see the men inside, and you could see yourself reflected behind them like a decision. Every surface held a cable, every cable an assumption. On the main console, a senior tech with gray at his temples tapped a key with a stubborn tenderness. Beside him, a younger man with round glasses kept his hands folded, as if afraid if he reached out he would start picking up the mess and be told to stop. The manager, Callahan, hair askew from running a hand through it one too many times, announced that the event would begin in less than 3 hours and that he did not intend to preside over the ruin of his own career. He said this as if the building, and the strangers from 3 time zones, and the weather outside the glass could be bullied into mercy. Another engineer explained that the failure wasn't a crash, but a lock, an encryption nested in old language, like finding a safe behind a wall in a house where the architect had retired without leaving a forwarding address. Gloria hovered at the edge of the doorway, eyes lowered, posture of someone prepared to be invisible. "If one more expert fails," someone joked, not unkindly, but uncarefully, "we should call the kitchen." His friend laughed and added something about the espresso machine. Gloria felt the heat rise and pass. Everyone had their armor. Some people wore jokes. Callahan saw her then, really saw her, because stress makes you notice what can be dismissed. "Well," he said with a laugh too sharp, "we've tried everything else." "Let the maid try. Maybe she's got the magic touch." The room laughed the way rooms do when power tells them something is funny. Gloria did something she had not allowed herself in a long time. She stepped through the doorway and did not apologize for being there. "I can try," she said, voice steady, "if you'll let me." It is a human thing, the way silence turns when it realizes it has made a mistake. Callahan's face performed 3 expressions: surprise, embarrassment, defensiveness, in quick succession. "It was just a joke, ma'am," he said with the diplomat's tone that hotels teach their managers. "Don't take it personally." The young engineer with the round glasses unfolded his hands. "Have you seen a panel like this, Shas?" he asked. Not doubtful, curious. "I built systems like this," Gloria replied. It did not sound like a boast. It sounded like a fact from a weather report. Like sunrise at 6:24 to. He hesitated only a heartbeat and then pulled a chair out from the console. "Please." She took off her gloves with a care that you could mistake for ritual and laid them on the counter in a neat square. She sat. The keyboard had the look of something that had been shouted at. She didn't touch it yet. She let her hands hover while her eyes traced the pathways other people had already tried. You could tell where panic had driven them, which defaults had lured them into dead alleys. She had written some of those defaults once, years ago. Young enough to believe a clever failsafe could anticipate every way a frightened human could make a mess of a morning. She didn't allow herself to dislike the person she had been. She allowed herself to move past her. She began with a basic system command, not the safe, advertised path, but one level lower, like stepping just off the carpet into the old wooden flooring that had been there before someone with a budget discovered rugs. Versa Shield had left that timber behind. Huxley Dynamics had built on top of it. Nobody had bothered to rip out the bones because bones keep houses standing, and besides, most people forgot about them. The console hesitated, then rewarded her with a prompt she had not seen in a decade, the software equivalent of a friend you haven't spoken to since one of you moved away, but who answers on the second ring with, "You okay?" She accepted. She stepped into root. She bypassed a layer built by someone who loved elegance more than mercy, and she whispered an old passphrase under her breath first, like people say, Grace H1D3N, Truth 1998, so the part of her brain that doubted would hear the words and sit down. The console beeped and then sang, a quiet, victorious tone that no one else might have noticed if they weren't listening for it. On the wall, camera feeds blinked back into being and stitched themselves to their places like photographs sliding into frames. Door logic restored, alarms rearmed. The elevator control released its temporary hold. The diagnostic screen shrugged off its angry red and settled into a pleasant green, as if embarrassed by all the fuss. For a full second, no one said anything. Then someone whispered a word you wouldn't repeat in front of a child, and followed it with, "She did it." The young one with glasses leaned forward, as if his body needed an explanation his mind already had. The older tech laughed and swore softly again, and said that he hadn't seen code that clean since the dawn of sense. Gloria moved out of route as carefully as a seamstress lifts a needle from fabric. She's repaired so well you can't see the tear. "How did you?" Callahan began, but the question dissolved before it found a verb. He was a man who had rarely been interrupted by his own surprise. Gloria stood. "My name is Gloria Smith," she said, "and I used to be a senior security architect at Somerville Tech." She did not rush the next sentence. Letting it land in the room was part of the work. I lost my career to a false accusation. They didn't take what I know. Not all silence is equal. Some silences judge, others learn. This one did the latter. You could feel it. It settled in the corners and listened to itself. An event official in a wine-colored blazer came in, breathless, and took stock of the humming screens. When she asked what had happened, the young engineer answered with something that sounded like gratitude. "Gloria Smith happened," he said. The official offered Gloria a hand and a request for professional identification. "Not anymore," Gloria said, and she did not lower her eyes when she said it. Callahan, who had been standing very still as if movement would keep the moment from counting, recovered enough to announce that the matter was resolved and that Miss Smith could return to her duties. No one moved. Even the screens seemed unwilling to blink. Gloria did not raise her voice. "I'm not your maid today, Mr. Callahan," she said. "Today I did the job the situation required." There are sentences that leave a dent. That one did. She left the room not in triumph, but with a steadiness that felt like an answer to a question she had asked herself in private for too long. In the staff locker room, she washed her hands for longer than necessary, listening to the ordinary sounds of a building that had decided not to fall apart that day. Lena peeked around the corner with eyes that had seized on the rumor and refused to let go. "They said you fixed the whole thing," she whispered. "Is it true?" Gloria dried her hands. "I did what I know how to do," she said. "I've been doing it a long time." When Lena asked how long and how, Gloria told her the truth in plain pieces. 15 years, a department, a paper she liked because it was honest. Then the accusation, quick as a trap. The suspension so fast she didn't have time to be angry about it until much later, after anger had less use than a clean towel in the rain. The failure of courts to tell the difference between a file and a life. "I slept in my car for a little while," she said, and the sentence didn't care if anyone pitied it. "Then I worked in diners. Then I came here. Why didn't you tell anyone?" Lena asked, not reproachful, just bewildered at the idea of carrying a story like that alone. "Because I got tired of being a lesson in other people's mouths," Gloria said simply. "And because sometimes people hear a story only when you don't need them to hear it anymore." At 9 o'clock, the summit began with the flinty confidence of people who still had their jobs. The lobby regained its pleasant rhythm. The glass elevator returned to its role as a camera for the wealthy to see themselves ascending. Upstairs, though, something else was happening. Tex, who had laughed in the morning, watched a clip of an old lecture by a woman whose younger face wore the same steady gaze as the housekeeper who had saved their morning. Someone brought up the paper with G.L.O. Smith on the cover and read aloud a paragraph about humility in system design. No one laughed this time. By mid-morning, the regional director arrived. He had a face that practiced economy. No wasted words, no extra smile. He asked for a meeting with anyone who mattered, and after a moment's indecision, the manager included Gloria in that category, because excluding her would have been loudly idiotic. In the administrative conference room, the carpeting tried to convince everyone to behave. The director, his name was Barlow, and he used it sparingly, asked the question that good leaders ask when they genuinely want to know where the fire started. "How," he said, "did a level 4 security failure at an international event get resolved by a member of the housekeeping staff?" The room inhaled the way rooms do when one person's answer might be fairer than another's. The young engineer with glasses chose the truth. "Because she isn't just housekeeping," he said. "She's Gloria Smith. She taught us more in 2 minutes than most of us learned in 2 years. Barlow looked at Gloria as if he intended to remember her face. "Ms. Smith," he said, "you saved this building, this event, and our reputation." He turned to the manager. "And you?" Callahan found words that sounded like apology, but still held on to excuses as if they were lucky coins in a pocket. "I was under pressure," he said. "I didn't realize—" "You did realize," Gloria said, not waiting for permission because permission had not served her well. "You saw a woman in a cleaning uniform and assumed everything about her. And you did it out loud, in a room full of people who learned from your example." Barlow studied her. There are moments when a person understands a rule they thought they already knew. His face made that small shift. He turned to his assistant and issued a directive that sounded like a door opening somewhere none of them could see yet. "I want a report on qualified staff working below their potential, and draft an offer for Miss Smith." Today, in a different story, the room might have applauded. In this one, it exhaled, which is better. You can clap for a performance. A breath belongs to you. The offer came in a conference room with a view of the parking garage. A view Gloria preferred because it was honest about where the power in cities really lived, under the buildings, holding them up. The letterhead belonged to Huxley Dynamics. The job title Lead Cybersecurity Architect felt like someone had returned a book they had borrowed 2 years ago and finally remembered your address. The salary would return her life to a scale where groceries didn't include arithmetic. "You don't have to decide now," Barlow said, and meant it. Noah Reynolds, she had learned the young engineer's name just as he had learned hers, stood near the coffee tray, trying not to glow. "We would be honored," Barlow added, and the sentence wore its suit well. Gloria read the offer once and then again, not because she doubted it, but because you don't rush a threshold. She thought of the weeks that smelled like coffee poured at 2 a.m., of a car that had not judged her for falling asleep in it, of the women who cleaned offices at midnight and left encouraging notes on the mirrors for each other in dry erase marker. She thought of the way the console had recognized her, the beep that felt like a hand placed on a shoulder by a friend who knows. She signed. Noah made a sound that could have been a laugh if he had allowed it. If a lobby can look surprised, the Savile Grand did when she walked through it that evening in clothes she had chosen for their comfort rather than their apology. The badge on her lanyard announced her new role. People who had let their eyes slide past her 2 days earlier stood aside. Some of them smiled at the floor. Some looked at her and said her last name like a small correction, Miss Smith, as if testing what it felt like in their mouths. Later, outside the main doors, Lena waited with 2 coffees, the cheap kind that tasted of the night shift and victory. "First day of your real comeback," she said. "Not just a comeback," Gloria answered. "This time they heard me when I spoke." The work that came next was the kind she liked best. Not showy, not designed for applause. The work of checking the screws that kept the stage from wobbling while everyone else admired the actors. She audited access logs and found the thumbprint of a contractor who had planted the old encryption like a landmine years ago, perhaps as job security, perhaps out of laziness, perhaps both. She sat with the current IT team and taught them where the bones of their system ran, exactly the places companies forget when they remodel a house, and then wonder why the floor sighs when the weather changes. She insisted that every emergency protocol include a plain English option and a door someone could open with a key if the electricity decided to have opinions. When word passed that the woman who had once been accused had returned to the field with a badge that permitted entry rather than refused it, old colleagues wrote cautiously kind messages. the digital equivalent of leaving a pie on someone's porch. A few of them apologized for disappearing at the time. A few offered explanations, which are a cousin to apologies but not quite the same. She wished them well. She didn't need anything back from those years. They had given her something she would not have learned any other way. The freedom of letting a story be true without it having to be the whole truth. The press wanted a hero, their favorite kind, an unexpected one. The hotel's PR person suggested a photo in the lobby with the glass curving into the morning. Gloria considered and declined gently. "Put the IT team in the picture," she said. "Make the sentence plural. They restored the system. If you put my face on it, people will clap and forget. If you put the team on it, maybe someone will ask how to staff their own team better." "Are you sure?" the PR woman asked, surprised. "People love a redemption story." "I didn't go anywhere," Gloria replied. "I was here all along." 1 week later, in a banquet room repurposed for folding chairs and possibility, Gloria stood before a group of teenagers who had found out that cybersecurity did not require a cape or a hoodie, only a stubborn mind and a good set of questions. The hotel had donated the space. Huxley had provided snacks and lanyards. A local nonprofit had ensured there were more girls than boys in the room because equal opportunity does not grow by accident. She talked about systems the way some people talk about gardens, how they require tending, how weeds thrive when neglected, how you must plan for storms. She held up a blue cleaning rag and told them it hid nothing of importance. She told them about a password you whisper before you type it, not because the machine needs to hear it, but because you do. She told them to remember the names of the people who hold the doors open each day, and to learn the names of the people who sweep the rooms where history will be made tomorrow. Afterward, on the rooftop where the wind came friendly over the city, she stood alone for a minute, because quiet is not the same as loneliness when you have chosen it. She thought of the versions of herself that had taken turns holding the wheel, the young engineer who believed in clean code and coffee, the woman in a car finding a spot beneath the one streetlight that made her feel less invisible, the housekeeper who built a kingdom 18 inches deep on a rolling cart, the architect who had returned to the room and found her seat still warm. She did not blame the years that had gotten messy. Messy years teach you which parts of your life are furniture and which parts are floor. She had learned what she could stand on. The Savile Grand learned things too. Barlow's report turned into a practice. People discovered that the night guard had a degree in mathematics he'd earned between double shifts, that a woman at the front desk had the makings of a training manager, that the kid who loaded banquet chairs into vans could keep an inventory in his head, with the accuracy of a machine if someone would only give him a spreadsheet and a reason. Some promotions followed. Some raises happened. The building breathed better. Callahan made his apology the way some men make dinner, not beautiful, but sincere if you knew what to look for. He did not excuse himself this time. He looked Gloria in the eye and used the sentence she had earned twice over. "I was wrong." She accepted with a nod. Forgiveness is not an eraser. It is a door you agree not to slam each time you walk through it. There were still mornings when the job required tedium. Not every day is a rescue. In meetings, Gloria found herself explaining, gently and repeatedly, that you do not judge the health of a system by whether it makes noise. Quiet can be a symptom of neglect or nourishment, and the difference is whether someone has their hands on the controls, doing ordinary things well. She taught executives to love maintenance. She told stories about bridges. On a slow Saturday, Lena asked if Gloria ever missed the hotel cart. "I miss the way the towels give up," Gloria said with a smile. "But I don't miss the part where people stopped saying my last name." "You could keep the cart," Lena suggested. "We could let you take it for a spin sometimes, just to feel fast." Gloria laughed, and the sound felt like something that had waited in her chest and finally gotten permission to come out and look around. She did not feel the need to be fast anymore. She felt like a person moving at exactly the speed her life asked of her. That afternoon, she walked through the lobby with Noah beside her, explaining an approach to legacy systems that sounded more like mentorship than instruction. A little boy in a miniature suit tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered that the lady looked important. The mother smiled and said, "She is." Gloria heard it and let herself enjoy it for the length of the hallway. Months later, the thing that had started as a fix became a story people told their daughters. Not because the world had changed overnight, it hadn't, but because one woman had insisted, quietly and without permission, on doing the job she could do and letting the result speak louder than the room that tried to keep her out. Some stories need to be told at volume. Some need to be told steadily, like a voice that keeps talking while you find your way through a dark house toward a light switch. On the anniversary of the summit, the Savile Grand hosted a smaller event for local high school students interested in technology and the unglamorous art of keeping cities from falling apart. The lobby smelled again of orange blossoms and linen. The air held no panic. Gloria opened the program by telling them that titles are maps, not destinations, that a uniform is a tool, not a prophecy, that a locked system is not a verdict, only a puzzle with a patient solution. She told them that the world would sometimes mistake them on purpose and that this was not their fault, but it might still be their problem to solve. "When that happens," she said, "remember your name. Say it out loud if you have to. Say the name of someone you love. Names are keys." After the questions and the selfies, a girl with braids came up alone and asked if anyone had ever tried to make Gloria feel small on purpose. Gloria answered yes, without bitterness, and watched the relief move through the girl's shoulders. "What did you do?" the girl asked. "I did the work anyway," Gloria said, "and I learned to enjoy the sound a door makes when it unlocks." The elevator chimed then, punctuating the sentence, and the girl laughed the kind of laugh you carry home in a pocket. The building hummed as if content. Later, alone again on the rooftop where the city kept its promises, Gloria thought about the day the system failed and how easily the failure could have turned into a humiliation to be survived in private. She considered the small swerve in the hallway that had put her in front of the control room and made the rest of her life lean in a different direction. Big changes look like headlines from far away. Up close, they look like a woman taking off her gloves, folding them into a square, and choosing to sit down where she knows her hands will be of use. She did not feel like a miracle. She felt like proof that ordinary work, done well at the right moment, can look like a miracle to a room that isn't expecting it. The difference between arrogance and authority is whether you know how to clean up after yourself. She hoped the young ones would learn that without having to sleep in their cars to discover it. She watched the light move across the buildings and imagined all the rooms where people were being told indirectly that they belonged outside the door. She had been there. So many had. The path back in is not always dignified. Sometimes you mop a floor next to the room that forgot your name, and you decide that forgetting is a reversible condition. Sometimes you hear an old song through a doorway and realize you still remember the words. Sometimes the word is your name. That night, after the last folding chair had rattled into a closet, she took the long way to the parking garage, past the control room whose glass no longer intimidated anyone she loved. The console slept. The screens glowed with ordinary confidence. She stood for a moment, hand on the doorframe, and gave thanks to the women who had left notes on mirrors, to the men who had set out coffee when they didn't have to the girl who had asked the right question, to the boy in the miniature suit who had noticed, to the version of herself who had refused to decide that humiliation was destiny. In the garage, the evening air was the kind that made even cement smell soft. She slid into her car and sat with her hands on the wheel and let the quiet complete the day. The city lifted and laid down its lights one by one. Somewhere outside the Savile Grand, another building had a console that would beep tomorrow in impatience, and someone would panic, and someone would make a joke, and someone would step forward anyway and say, "I can try." Some mornings a single sentence changes what a room believes about itself. That was enough to sleep on. The Savile Grand continued to be a place where people walked in and straightened their shoulders. It continued to sell confidence and room service, and the idea that success did not require squeaky wheels. But if you looked carefully, you could see the other thing it sold now: the possibility that an unseen person might be the one who kept the world from tilting when it mattered. The lobby didn't advertise that product. It didn't have to. Word of mouth is stronger when it comes from people who clean up after the celebration. And in a small office that hadn't existed a year before, with a window that looked out over a loading dock and the exact spot where the sun rose between two warehouse roofs, Gloria Smith wrote protocols that would never trend and coached a team that would never be famous and took calls from girls who wanted to know whether they were allowed to take up space. She told them each a version of the same answer. "Yes," she said, "and if someone forgets, remind them. The reminder is part of your job, but it isn't your whole name." She still carried a blue rag in her desk drawer. Habit, maybe, or a kind of compass. When her hands needed to remember the shape of obedience, she would take it out and fold it twice and put it back. It reminded her that care belongs to everyone and that dignity is not a certificate hanging on a wall. Dignity is a practiced skill. When the next summit rolled into town, they asked her to give the keynote. She declined politely and suggested 3 other names, 2 women, 1 man, none of them likely picks if a committee were left alone to guess. She sat in the audience and watched them speak sense and looked around at the faces when sense landed. She clapped like anyone else, and afterward she stacked chairs while her new team laughed at how quickly she could make a room ready for what comes next. Because that had always been the job, she realized. In code, or in housekeeping, or in a life interrupted and resumed, the work was preparation. Clear the error messages. Put the towels where tired people can find them. Leave the mirror clean enough for someone to see what's possible. Unlock the door before the room fills up with the wrong kind of noise. And when people ask who did it, say, "We did." Because truth tastes better when it's shared. At the end of the night, she walked back through the lobby, still curved, still generous with light, and paused a moment in the doorway to the control room. She could see her reflection layered over the glass, a woman wearing neither apology nor armor. She smiled at the quiet hum, then turned toward the elevators, her badge swinging like punctuation at the end of a long, satisfying sentence. She pressed the button and waited. Waiting, she had learned, doesn't mean standing still. It means knowing you've already moved. As the doors opened and she stepped inside, a thought came to her unbidden and welcome. I didn't get my life back. I walked into the life that was waiting for me once I remembered how to say my own name out loud. And the city, arranged in lights like a promise kept, lifted her gently toward home. Gloria's story carries a simple lesson worth holding close. Uniforms are not limits. and titles are not truth. Skill, dignity, and purpose often live quietly in people we overlook until the moment they are finally seen. If you've ever been underestimated, or if you've chosen to notice someone others ignored, share your moment in the comments and rate this story 0 to 10. If these everyday miracles move you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Your voice might be the light someone else is waiting for.